Hello, good morning. Happy Saturday. Hope you brought your beverage of choice. And I thank you very much for joining me on this Saturday morning. So, in order to respect everyone's time, I'll go ahead and get started and have to wrap this up in an hour, barring any technological issues or anything like that. It is raining here, so you just never know. And this is the first live here. So, hopefully all goes well and proceed we'll just proceed one way or the other. So again, are you living a life of vigor or a life of burnout? That is the topic of this conversation. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Vicki. I am the founder of Soul Essentials Health and Wellness. I have I'm working on a certification in biology of trauma and certified mental health coaching, mental wellness coaching. And so that education and that background has really given me a passion to help others, and also battling back kind of from my own health journey in the last couple of years. And so it's really helped kind of push me forward and take that leap of faith, if you will. We grow in community. Why am I doing this? We did this as an in-person talk, and then I had some requests for people to do if I could do this online. And so I am attempting to do that now, and just to kind of see how if we can get a group of a community of women together that want to just support one another and also obviously grow. My mission is to help other women rise up to their authentic, truest self, to ignite their energy, find their passion again, have healthy boundaries. And so that is my goal today. So I will go ahead and share my screen. I have a presentation here, and hopefully you can see that clearly. I'm going to go ahead and take my face off the screen just so we can make it as full as possible. And again, are you living a life of burnout or a life of vigor? We grow in community. That is my goal here, is to help others grow in community, rise up. And I would like to say that this is a soulful approach to health and wellness. Why? At the time that I started coaching and had no words to verbalize like what was going on, how I was feeling, I could sum it up by saying it was a soul sickness. And so that led me to the Phoenix. And you can see that up in the corner is my logo, which is very important to me. And that Phoenix story that I learned many years ago and the rising up of that. And I'll get into it a little bit more in a couple of minutes. Before we go any further, I do, I'm sorry, jumped slides there. An icebreaker, we would have done this if we were in person. And basically, Soul Essentials, the categories that I'll talk about today will fall into 3 categories. So Mike, as a coach, I like to use a systematic approach, mind, body, and spirit. It's all connected. And so we really want to make sure that we take that into account. So in one word, if you were in person with me, we would be putting this on a sticky, getting up, moving around a little bit. So if you can stand up and kind of just, bring some oxygen and blood to your body, you can type in the chat one word that you would like to get out of listening to a webinar like this. Mind, think, are you stressed out? Do you need less stress? Are you having fun? Body, are you moving your body? Are you getting good sleep? Spirit, do you have faith, a support system that you can turn to help you through those hard times? And accountability, someone there for accountability. So in one word, you can just put that in the chat, and then we can see where that common denominator is among everyone. Before I get started, I have to say a disclaimer, and that is that any of the information that I share with you today, that's meant to empower, educate, and inspire you to take an engaged role in your healthcare. And the experiences I share will be based on my own personal journey, as well as those that I have coached. So just take what resonates with you and leave the rest. This is in no way meant to diagnose, prescribe. It's for informational purposes only. I believe the health journey is a partnership of 3, and that number 3 stands out in many ways. You'll see through this talk. You, the client, your individual needs, where you are, and where you want to go. It's not a one size fits all. There's no one diet. There's no one pill. There's no one food plan that's right for every person. So we look at you, the client, me, the coach, your partner in crime, right? Your accountability partner. But sometimes you have to use that tough love to see the gaps. And I know my coaches have helped me tremendously throughout my lifetime and seeing gaps that I couldn't see, and actually helping me navigate through the things that I thought where I was doing correctly that maybe ended up causing some havoc later on in time. And then your practitioner, of course, you want to make this, you never want to do anything or make any rapid changes without first talking with your doctor. And and as a coach, we can be a liaison, right, between you and your practitioner. He can give you, the recommendations, and if you need help with the follow through and stuff, that's where a coach comes into play. So this slide here says, are you living a life of vigor or a life of burnout? What does that mean? Well, are you being intentional and able to identify what makes your soul sing? Vigor is when you're flourishing. Vigor is when you have physical energy, you have sharpness of mind, mental acuity, and you have an overall emotional well-being. Burnout is the opposite, and that's languishing. And those words come from positive psychology, flourishing and languishing. But burnout is the epidemic of our time. We're seeing chronic stress, obviously leading to chronic diseases, leading to more mental wellness issues, leading to autoimmunity. And you don't have to look far or at too many statistics to find that. It's basically a nervous system dysregulation. And if you think about things that you train for, often we're trained, to work, we're trained athletically, but we never discipline ourselves to rest. And when you get to a state of burnout where there is total system dysregulation, really, I'll say nervous system because it definitely starts there, but it affects your digestion, it affects your hormones, it affects your mood. So it's an overall feeling, just physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausted. And a little bit about my story, I left a 35-year career in healthcare about 8 months ago. And despite doing all the right things, anybody who follows me knows that I, was exercising and doing the fitness and meal planning and prepping and all of these things. I was doing the right things. But despite that, I ended up burning out. And that was a term that I didn't even know existed. All my years in healthcare, I never wrote down a diagnosis of burnout in a patient's chart. As far as when we're prepping charts and we're adding problem lists in, I'd never recall in all of those years seeing one that said burnout. You would see anxiety, you would see depression, you would see various diagnoses, but I'd never seen burnout. So to me, it was like, listen, that's woo-woo. That's not a real thing. Just like adrenal fatigue. There's a lot of talk around that adrenal dysfunction and it not being a diagnosis. But that adrenal dysfunction is one of the things that was pivotal in my story. And it was at stage 4, which is burnout. And I'll get into a little bit more about what that means. But it was decades, right? This can happen over decades. It's not an overnight situation. And so for my story, we'll just say this started really a lot after, at least noticeably after the kids left the house and empty nesting. And then you're kind of forced to look at yourself. What is it I'm doing with my life? We start asking, what is our purpose? What is our plan? And so I ended up aligning myself in, relationships that were not good for me. And I turned to work, and work became my identity. That is where I found worth and value. I could be productive, I could be self-sufficient, and I could excel because I could keep on getting one more degree and one more certification. And that's what identified my worth. Well, fast forward several years, right? I said I was in that career for 30 years, and I did manage to accomplish a lot of things. But there came a point where I was just completely burning out from the job, and I left the job. Then I decided to move away. And so it was a lot for my nervous system. Burnout wrecked my life. Everything that drove me to produce, to be self-sufficient, to excel, it was taken, that was taken away. I had this consistent theme of a history of overworking, people pleasing, looking for external validation. And I know any high achievers or people out there really kicking butt and taking names, I hope that you are prioritizing rest in your life. And you can tell that by how you feel in your body. Some of the signs of burnout are here, but these can be signs of a lot of things. And when I say this, I want to talk about, are you having these signs consistently? And, it's just not getting better. Have you become cynical at work? more critical at work. As we age, our stress hormone, our cortisol levels, those will start to become more resistant. So therefore we need more to be able to handle stress capacity. So if you've been in work for 20, 30 years, you may see that capacity, not being where it used to be. Are you dragging yourself to work? Are you having trouble getting started in the mornings or getting started at work? Have you become like really irritable or, with your coworkers, your customers, your clients? You can just kind of feel that snort. You can feel that. I think we would all agree that there's been a societal shift in the last couple of years, a lot of uncertainty, isolation. We've had increased mental wellness issues, domestic violence, suicides. And so what I learned throughout this is, we need sometimes to take a look at striving less and trusting more. And it doesn't mean that you are going to, not set big goals or find joy. It's about being open to possibilities. And so sometimes you just need to take a moment and kind of just like drop down in your body, those emotions and that anxiousness. We all feel that somewhere in our body, right? Sometimes for me, it's a stomach or in the heart. When we're feeling those emotions in our body, it is signs. It's trying to tell us something. Now, the different states of the nervous system. So this is important, and the reason I'm talking about this is once you understand the states of your nervous system, then you have the ability to regulate it. There are certain things that you can do, different body-based exercises through breathing. Sometimes people will use meditation, prayer. There are different things you can do to regulate your nervous system. The parasympathetic state is considered often your rest and digest state. So you can kind of track like where you are during the day. It's a calm aliveness. It's not a feeling I've ever been really familiar with, but you may have that, you just feel calm. If I'm at the ocean and I'm just sitting there looking out in the water, that is one of those times that I know that I can feel my body and my nervous system literally just settle down. Sympathetic response is that stress response. That's the fight or flight. That is when you are like feeling like a hamster on the wheel. High energy state. You oftentimes you find yourself overtraining, multitasking, overscheduling. Your body's basically in survival mode. And what it really needs is a sense of safety and a sense of support. A lot of people will add in the freeze state with this. And actually the freeze state is the next one, which is overwhelm. That is a low energy state. That's where you need to bring time, you need energy, and you need to bring safety into the body. It's that if you think about holding up boulders on your shoulders, right? Holding them up, you start to shake, you start getting, increased heart rate, maybe you start to swell or sweat. That's the stress response. You're holding on, you're, high energy. But that point when it collapses, when those boulders just bring you down, that's the state of overwhelm. That's the low energy state. People use terminology like, I'm done, I give up, I just don't have it in me anymore. And so those are the different states of the nervous system. And by knowing, like I said, where you are and kind of tracking your nervous system, you have the ability to regulate and bring yourself, out of maybe those anxious feelings or depressed feelings. And you have to be really careful with overwhelm. You really want to lean into it, not push yourself. One of the biggest mistakes I made at the time this was happening was being completely stressed out, working 60, 70 hours a week and deciding I was going to then start training for a half marathon and start pumping out hour and a half exercises 6 days a week. It was more stress on my body. I was pumping out more cortisol from my adrenal glands. And it was actually not what I needed to do at that moment in time. We have to exercise. We do have to eat right, but we need, timing is everything. So what types of stress are we talking about here? And what do we want to do about it? And why am I even talking about this as far as wellness? Well, you can do all the right things. You can exercise, you can eat right, you can get sleep. But if you're constantly defaulting back to a dysregulated nervous system, you're never going to have that optimal health. So I like to think about this in a three-pronged approach where we look at things on the first tier is at psychological level. So, how do you feel? Are you tired? Are you stressed out? Are you feeling exhausted? Are you sleep deprived? Aging, that has something to do with it as well, because as we age, we start to have tissue breakdown. We have hormonal changes, environmental change or environmental situations. So Take a look and evaluate your internal environment. Do you have toxic environments at work, at home, in your home? Actually, you could have off-gassing of furniture. You could have all of the plug-ins. All of these things can be extra toxic burdens on your system that you don't need if you are at a state where you are completely depleted. Also external, looking at your environment, like, are you around a lot of chemicals, pesticides? What is your job? What does that expose you to? Mold, heavy metals, those kind of things. All we can, evaluate. And you can't go in and say, oh, we're going to take all these things out and remove us, because what does that do? That puts us in even further state of overwhelm. We want to take this approach very slow, incrementally. And then look at the second tier. The second tier is your biology. And that's where I talked about the biology of trauma and these other certifications. We have to look at what biologically, where are there imbalances? And this was where I had to learn a lot. By going down the road, the crazy train of dieting and deprivation, I had severe nutrient deficiencies. There was a lot of food sensitivities. I mentioned about the adrenal problems. Cortisol should be really high in the morning. Mine was nearly flatlined. And there's reasons for that too. Again, I mentioned about aging. That's just a piece of it, right? We become less resistant, but then you have constant stress pumping out of your body for decades and decades and decades. Eventually, it's going to get to a point where it's like no more. Glycation, that's where we want to have blood sugar it's stored for later use, like in the muscles. And if we don't have what we need and we're not eating for blood sugar control, then your body's going to store that fat instead of burn it. Inflammatory, what inflammation's happening in your body? You can tell that a lot of time by digestive situations, inflammation, joint pain. Looking at oxidative stress, looking at your immune system. Do you get a lot of colds or viruses? Your mood, your neurotransmitters. So your serotonin levels, and I have different assessments where you can see where are you with the serotonin levels? Where are you with dopamine, GABA? And another thing I would add on here is dietary. So dietary stress, because as I mentioned, nutrient deficiencies and having food sensitivities, those are all additional. Are you getting enough fiber? Are you eating and spiking your sugar instead of, then having crashes? That's the second layer. And the third layer, I will not get it to like a lot of what these different things mean, other than you can see there's a correlation. This is at a cellular level. And when you're in a state of overwhelm, there is mitochondrial compromise. You may remember from school that your mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. And so when you are in that place of overwhelm, that complete low energy state, your body, you've got to bring things in at a cellular level. There's different supplements you can use. Again, we could do this through with dietary things and obviously with sleep and all of these other things, but you've got to tackle it at a cellular level. And one of the things that really helped me was supplementation. I was on different protocols for brain inflammation and gut inflammation. And then I also came across the Mental Wellness Company, and some of their products really moved the dial for me. And they tightly aligned with this approach right here. This is a slide from their program that aligned so tightly with my coaching. Like, this is what we want to do. We want to take a look at these things, and then you may have to work backwards. If you're at this cellular level where you're depleted, then we got to bring some energy in first. And that's what my first step was. They had to bring in things that could give me energy just to get through the day, so that I wasn't having that afternoon crash, so that I wasn't going from the chair at work to the couch to the bed. That was a routine for a long time. And then you would go to those imbalances, work with your practitioner. We need to check things like your glucose, your A1C, your fasting insulin, and some of this pivotal testing that's not traditional in healthcare or insurance world and things like that, were why things were missed for me. We were doing testing, but we weren't testing all the right things. And it wasn't until I got that testing done that we found out about a lot of hormone imbalance, a lot of gut issues. And then, of course, once you start clearing up those things, you're going to start feeling better. You're going to start sleeping better. And this is the Mental Wellness Company approach to all of their products as well. So I won't get into, a lot about the products itself, other than to say this is one of the things that helped me. I partnered and affiliated with them because it really did make a big difference. And I am one who will not share things until I myself have tried them as well. Trauma. So why am I bringing in trauma? Trauma can be a loaded word. It can be a word that's triggering for some people. I believe collectively, most would agree that the last several years were really traumatic for many people for many reasons, whether it was because you lost businesses, you couldn't work out, you were stuck in the house, you were having to be rather than do. Um, we are now seeing the downstream effects of that. We are seeing that everywhere. Every time we turn on the TV, you can see it out in the world, with the different ways people, the lack of social engagement and things that are happening. So when I say the word trauma here, what trauma is not in any particular event. Okay, it is in how your body perceived that. So did you have too much coming at you at one time? Too much, too fast, and it overwhelmed your nervous system? Or did you have too little for too long? We can agree that in the last several years, there was a lot. We were in shutdown. People were losing things left and right. Everybody's emotions were all over the place. We were in a state of fear, panic, too much. It overwhelmed the nervous system. And then after a while, you get gears into it, right? Now you've gone too little for too long because the lack of support, the lack of connection. That's what the purpose of this very thing that I'm doing here is. We need to get connected again. We're wired for connection. Our brain is wired for survival, but our bodies are wired for connection. Now, I'll give you an example that happened in my situation where I talked about being an empty nester, and then working a ton of hours and then moving away from everyone I knew. So now I'm in a new environment, in a new job. It was too much. Then I decided my answer was, I'll start exercising and overtraining. So I was just piling on the stress and the stress, even though some of it could be considered healthy stress. That healthy stress at the wrong time can be detrimental to your health. And I had to find that out the hard way when I collapsed at work several years in, and then you collapse at work. There was too much too fast, and then too little for too long. I didn't have the support system anymore. I was at work all the time, so I really wasn't getting out socializing, being able to make friends and connect with people. And it wasn't until I started doing those things that, it really started to change. Again, that trauma is stored in your nervous system. So if I said 2020, that's probably going to trigger the same words for most people that hear this, right? We're going to go back to that, and our body may feel a certain way, depending on what your experience was through that situation. Another example is, I'll go into this next slide so I can talk a bit about intuition. If I ask you, do you trust your intuition 100% of the time? You're probably going to say yes. I would have said yes. And I did say yes until I learned a few things about intuition, that inner knowing, that you think about it, that gut feeling that you have, or are you listening to your heart, following your heart? These are things that you can do to feel better, but there's an axis between your gut, your brain, your heart, I'll talk about in a little bit, that actually is largely made up of your immune system. And all those things can affect your intuition. There's something called implicit memory, and that's basically your body's memory of a particular event. It has no bounds of time. And so, for example, in this situation, in 2004, I had a car accident, hit black ice, totaled my car. That's the explicit memory. That's the facts of that event. And you can think about this in any kind of a traumatic event where you feel like it overwhelmed you. But that's the facts. Wrecked my car, don't have to get into any story beyond that. But the implicit memory is the stored memory in my body. How did I feel at the time of that accident? Well, there was a pit in my stomach when I hit, I started to fishtail, and I felt that drop in my gut. My heart rate increased, started to sweat, started to cry and scream. I was white knuckled and bracing. That's the part that your body remembers. And that's the part that we have to drop down into and address to move forward. Logically thinking in my brain or medicating myself, I had to do that for a short time frame because I was terrified to drive. But it's meant to be short term. You got to deal with what's at the body, in the body, what's stored in the body if you want to move forward. Implicit memory is episodic or emotional memories. And so if there was relational memories, the more emotion there was, then the more memory that's stored. The procedural memories are encoded, and if it's a pre-verbal, if there's things that are at a pre-verbal level, those are procedural memories. Now, how does this all come together? Well, with those memories, based on whether it's implicit or if it's explicit memories, those can cause different symptoms. And recognizing those can give you a lot of keys into, okay, how do we regulate our nervous system? Once we do that, it regulates our digestion, it regulates our sleep. We feel better. We want to move more. My coaching style is using what I'll call like a freedom framework, and I'll talk more about what that means. But you want to dive into these different areas so you can kind of see where is the root cause of what's really happening. You'll see changes in mood. Now that can happen for various reasons. Obviously, we can have, hormones, but all of this stuff's affected by dysregulated nervous system, right? You're going to affect hormone balance. If you're not eating, you can affect hormones, you can affect your nervous system. They all are interrelated. So you may feel like, again, that gut feeling, was it one of, oh, sunshine and roses, this is a good thing? Or is it one where you made a good choice? Maybe you met a partner and it was all of those firecrackers got together as absolute misery. Why? Because your choices and your intuition at that time was coming from a trauma place rather than a healing place. So by recognizing these moods, recognizing somatic symptoms like that, do I feel this pain in my heart? Am I bracing my shoulders so that I'm pulling them up to my ears? Am I bracing my knees? Does my stomach hurt? Am I getting digestive issues? Some people automatically run to the bathroom when a nervousness or an anxiousness sets in. And once you get those body sensations and you're aware of them, you offer safety and offer support through the body. All of these things I'm talking about, we would do a much deeper dive into, obviously, in a coaching session. This is really just a very high level overview of the things that can lead to optimal health or also lead to burnout. When you start having burnout, you might find yourself starting to isolate. You'll start having that low energy. Like I said, you'll find yourself either running from, like in the mornings, maybe you're sluggish and you are having, so you eat, you go to caffeine, you move your body, maybe it's exercising, whatever it is to get that energy, then you have a crash at 2:00. All of these are signs and symptoms. There are signs and symptoms that something else is going on. There's adrenal dysfunction there. You're probably pumping out cortisol like crazy. And even skipping meals, fasting can not be good at the wrong time. When your body's depleted with nutrients, you're stressed out. The last thing you need to do is further deplete yourself of nutrients. Now, fasting is amazing and has many, many benefits. And I do that myself, 8 or usually from about maybe 10 to 12 hours, as long as I'm not feeling in that overwhelmed state. At that point, you got to have some smaller meals throughout your day to prevent any cortisol spikes. You want to kind of try to level out that cortisol. Now, what are some of these effects of stress? The effects of all of this, right? The stress, the trauma, the not eating. Well, these are the things that impacts. Like I said, they all run together. Your brain health, your gut health, your immune system, your hormones, your energy level, and your overall mental wellness. It might shock you to know that you have 3 brains. Now, it sounds insane, but just stick with me here. You have the brain in your head, and there's more and more research coming up with this all the time. You can go Google it, and you'll see this is coming out more and more all the time. But you got the brain in your head, right? Your logical brain. This is your intellect. However, did you know that the unconscious mind actually dictates 90% of your behavior? So no wonder we go in, we think, oh, I'm going to start this diet, or I'm going to make this resolution, and I'm going in full force. And then we get up the next morning and stay in bed, or we're like, oh, I'll do it for a few days. And then we just give up on ourselves, or we self-sabotage. Well, no wonder 90% of our behaviors coming from our unconscious mind, not that logical mind that decided I was going to do this thing. So, like I said, by identifying that again and becoming aware of how we maybe self-sabotage, why we give up on ourselves, why we put blame. There's millions of workouts, there's millions of food plans that work for a lot of people, but you will find people that will blame a person or a product because it didn't work for them. Well, maybe it wasn't the right product for them at the right time, or maybe there were other cofactors that were involved. Then we have the heart. So the heart brain. Now, There are actual neural pathways, of course, that run from your heart to your head. We have heart rhythms that run, go to your brain waves. That determines like your coherency. A lot of people focus on heart rate, but we also want to look at things like your heart rate variability, and that's the variability between your heartbeats. That can tell you a lot about your health. That can tell you a lot about how resilient you are. The more variability you have, the better. The less likelihood you are, I guess, predisposing yourself to cardiac issues and different things, because you want to have that variability. It will dictate how you can shift your nervous system. How resilient are you to shift maybe from that stress state down to that state of calm aliveness. And then we have your gut. More and more, that's been called the second brain. A lot of people have heard that by now. If you watch anything on social media now, you're seeing a lot with that, because why? They know that 90% of your body's serotonin, your happy hormone, 90% of that is in your gut, produced in your gut. So we've got this vagus nerve, which goes from, your cranial nerve in your brain, behind your esophagus, down into your diaphragm. It innervates out into all different organs. You have serotonin obviously in the brain, but you also have it in the gut. And that vagus nerve, which is like, we'll consider that's your information highway or your communication highway, that is going to, if you've got an inflamed gut, then we can have an inflamed brain. You've got an inflamed brain, you can have an inflamed gut. What happens in Vegas here doesn't stay in Vegas. That's a bi-directional communication. And so it's really important. Why we want to watch. What are we eating? We don't want inflammatory responses. And the idea here really is to kind of get, like I said, balance or homeostasis, if you will, across the gut, the brain, and the heart. And that's another part of the solution where I went into partnering with the mental wellness company, is because they are the only company right now that has supplements targeting the gut brain axis. It's so important. And that right there, when we get all of those things in sync, you can see over on the left, as I said, all of those systems that it's going to help. Now, this is the mental wellness continuum. And I thought this was a great representation. Where are you on this struggle bus? Because how you feel is not just in your head. We just talked about that. What you're eating has the ability to be communicated into your brain and cause inflammation, send signals to your brain that there's a threat. Food sensitivities, if you've got a food sensitivity, that can cause an inflammatory response, right? And then it also affects the heart rate, and then you might feel those palpitations, and then we go down that anxious road. So you can actually do things now to naturally improve your mental wellness, figuring out, where does my nervous system, how regulated am I? Am I down here in the 1, 2, 3 area where I'm depressed? I've got, diabetes, obesity, arthritis, fibromyalgia, ADHD. You can see the different things, down here we're really struggling. Typical 5, 6, about 4.5, 5, 6. That's the typical where not most, but that's where pre-pandemic, at least, typical people were. They were feeling a lot of fatigue, tension, and you can imagine how this is magnified. Congestion, upper respiratory, joint pains. That's the typical. But to be optimal, we want to feel energized. We want that calm aliveness. We want happiness. We don't want to get sick all the time, and we want to be really flexible, not only with our decisions, but with how we take care of ourselves. We can give ourselves a little grace at times that we need it. We it's okay to give yourself a little grace and back off of that 1.5 hour exercise at a time when you are stressed. And chances are you're just adding more insult to injury. You've got to back off and do something perhaps more gentle at that time. Now, these are just some statistics. I won't get into these, but these were happening. You can see that 2020, like the Psychiatric Association was saying at that point, nearly half of the Americans are anxious about the possibility of the whole pandemic situation. And more than 1/3 of Americans are having a serious impact on their mental health. This here was in the Washington Post. This is pushing America into a mental health crisis. So it's getting published. It's getting more awareness, and you never would talk about mental wellness before. I know that when I would go in and people would say, manage your stress, or you just need to get over it, or this, you're tired, but yet all the labs are coming back normal. It would just make me so angry because I thought I was handling stress, right? With all of my exercising and every morsel that I put in my mouth. But honestly, it was more stress at the time. So I talked a lot about gut, that gut health connection, that gut brain health connection. You can see here leaky gut. That is also a term that is debated. Sometimes you'll hear it called intestinal permeability or endotoxemia. This is where there is there's a breach in your intestinal barrier. So you think about a pair of pantyhose, sheen pantyhose, and you've got that barrier separating. You've got your gut lining. You've got that barrier that is separating what's going into your stomach, what you eat, from getting into your bloodstream. And you have what they call tight junctions. And those junctions are what keep those large particles or proteins from getting out into the bloodstream. Well, the more insults you have on your gut, whether it's your food sensitivities, whether it is the fake foods, whether it's environmental stuff like the pesticides and the herbicides that's being added, whether you have sensitivities to gluten or dairy, medications, antibiotics, just think about all of the hits to your gut. The more and more and more we're doing that, then those tight junctions will start to get damaged. You'll have perforations, if you will, in that barrier. So now think about a pair of fishnet hose. Now we've got particles and things getting into our bloodstream that we don't want in there. And this then can cause, inflammatory responses, which could end up being systemic responses. And you can see all of the barriers, we have that skin and sinus barrier. We have our sinus and mouth, I'm sorry. We have barrier, another skin is another barrier that keeps what's on the outside from getting into our world. You can see where it can affect your hormones, your thyroid, adrenal glands. Again, that pumping cortisol out because you're putting something into your system that's overwhelming it. Leaky gut is the precursor to autoimmunity, and the gut inflammation leads to brain inflammation via that vagus nerve, as I mentioned. More than 80% of the messaging between the gut and brain comes from the gut. So again, why is it so important that we watch what we eat? There is also a response you can have, your body's normal response. Let's just say this. If you start to have these symptoms of intestinal permeability, your body's normal response is to attack that, whatever that is that's in your bloodstream that shouldn't be there. And so viruses, bacteria, environmental toxins, that's your body, exquisitely built to address those issues. When you start having those breakdowns and barriers, your body still sees that stranger danger, and now it starts attacking itself. So that's where we get into a lot of the autoimmunity. We're going to start having systemic issues, dysregulating our nervous system, basically affecting our digestion, the amount of acid in our bodies and how our food's getting broke down. And then you're not going to be absorbing things. So a lot of times we were told vitamins is just expensive pee. Well, if you're not absorbing your vitamins and your nutrients the way you should be, then sure, it's leaky pee. Or it's a leaky pee. Yeah, it's expensive pee. But again, this only happens. This breakdown that you see with the intestinal permeability only happens with leaky gut. This then will increase your cortisol levels and your hormone levels, and you've got that vicious circle. Stress wreaks havoc on our gut, but we can find ways to modulate and figure out those food sensitivities and protect those tight junctions. Now, the next slide, we can't talk about, oops. Oh, yeah, that's right. I was going to show you this. This is just another one in how the bacteria affects the brain and the body. Again, you can see all of the different disease states that are actually affected by the gut. You can see depression. You can see mental health issues such as schizophrenia. You can see obesity, cancers, autism, Parkinson's. All of these things now are how bacteria affects the brain and the body. Now, we can't talk about gut without talking about poop. So we're going to look here just briefly at the Bristol stool scale. What's normal, what's not normal? Many times you'll ask people, do you have any issues with your gut? And they'll be like, no, I don't have any gut issues. But yet they're constantly gassy, bloated, vacillating between constipation, diarrhea. Your stool can tell you a lot. What's normal, what's not normal. These like hard pellet looking or looking like nuts, that is not normal. Hard, rigid edges here on your stool is not normal. You want to be kind of here where it's sort of sausage like. There's no rigid or cracks or surfaces. Smooth, just think like sausage, snake. Your colon is, I think, 22 feet long. You want to have that smooth. You shouldn't see any mucus. You shouldn't see any diarrhea or blobs, things like that in your stool. So you really want to be, obviously you don't want to sit there and dissect, but you want to at least be aware. And I'm going to show you this funny thing, this bracelet here. Dr. Maricel, she has Queen of the Thrones and the castor oil packs. Highly, highly recommend taking a look at that. And she wrote the book. It's called Oh Shit, actually. But she did this bracelet. And this is basically the different colors of your stool. So how about that for a conversation starter? Because as you start to age, we all know that a good bowel movement and good sleep means a good day. Because as we age, it's more and more difficult to reach that. All right, so we'll go ahead back here, sleep. And I couldn't dare talk to you about sleep, what is healthy for you in this whole freedom framework, right? These whole essentials of health without talking about sleep. It's the most important principle of basic health. If you don't have sleep, it affects every function in your body, from the foods that you choose to eat to the way your muscles and your organs function, the decisions that you make, and the way your body and your mind handle stress. Sleep Smarter was written by Sean Stevenson, and I highly recommend that book for sure. Another one that I recommend is called Sacred Rest, and that goes into the different types of rest outside of just sleep, which is what most of us think that we really need, and especially if you're coming from that state of exhaustion and overwhelm. And so if you want any of the resources that I mentioned throughout this talk, I can provide you with a great little video he has that really in about 5 minutes sums up how important sleep is. This is another one of these things that we would dive into when we're evaluating, what is the root causes to how you are feeling. Faith and freedom. So that is another part of this freedom framework. Suffering is the inability to live authentically. That is the biggest struggle right now, right? We don't feel like we can just live our lives, be who we are. A lot of people were stuck in jobs where we're doing it out of obligation, or we're doing it because we got to pay the rent. Let's face it, we need to work, right? But that overworking and not finding a balance between rest and family, and how many times do you work overtime to make extra money for things you don't need that ultimately cost you time with your family? I started, I've always vacillated, right, in and out of church throughout the years. And it was several years ago, prior to this all going down, that I realized I needed to get that back in my life. And had I not done that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here talking about this today, because it's one of those things for me that I needed that support. I needed to trust more, right? That strive less, trust more. That's my story. That's the story of so many people that I've talked to over the years. We really got to give ourselves a break sometime. And I'm going to tell you this story. What the final breaking point for me was on August 13th of 2022. After having several different episodes of collapsing, doing all the workups, labs coming back normal. We did find some incidental things throughout that time, but I wasn't recovering. I wasn't bouncing back at all. Like I had never experienced before in my life. And on that particular day, we were headed to Cleveland with my grandchildren and to visit my sister for birthdays, to celebrate birthdays. And we got up to go to breakfast that next morning. I had recently switched careers. At this point, I was having massive panic attacks. Like I had never even experienced those before. And I've always been anxious to some degree. It took a long time to figure out where that originated, but I've always had anxiousness to some degree. But at this point, it was taking me 4 hours in the morning just to get my wits about me, right? And be able to get through the day. And I was completely in survival mode. And I've talked to so many people who are feeling this exact same way right now. It takes everything in you just to get through the day. Well, that morning we got up for breakfast and my sister looked at me and I remember feeling kind of shivery and cold. And she's like, "Are you okay?" And the next thing I know, I fell to the ground, had convulsive activity, and I could hear her screaming in the background, but I couldn't respond. It's like everything shut down. The next thing I remember is paramedics being there. I didn't want to go into the hospital because this had happened before, but I didn't listen to the signs. I didn't listen to the fact that my body was heading to this space where you're getting to a place to the point of no return if you don't stop. Keep pushing, go ahead, keep pushing. And then when I was laying in the emergency room, I heard the words. Someone said to me, Vicki, you can go back and keep doing what you're doing and let it kill you, or you can choose to do something else. But the most riveting thing, which everyone, I talk about in coaching, you got to find your why. You need that why that makes you cry. Why is that? Because you're not going to give up no matter what. You're not going to self-sabotage. You're not going to give up on yourself. Was when I was being rolled into that ER or into that ambulance, and I saw my granddaughter's eyes as big as saucers, and this is still very raw for me. It had such an impact. I looked and saw that, and I was like, they will never see me like this again. I lost my way somehow over the years, and I started identifying with all the wrong things, external validation, and now it's caught up with me. And so that gave me the courage to then walk away from the career, to take this leap of faith, to try and, use all of the education and now, and wisdom, and now the experience to help other people that are in this situation. And listen, guys, this starts in childhood. There is, I mentioned trauma, and part of my story is abuse. There was, different types of abuse. And so that set a precedence, that changes your biology, that changes your posture. We start doing things like bracing and then pulling those shoulders up. And guess what? When you pull that shoulder up, you are now blocking off that thoracic inlet, which guess what? Shuts your communication off to your emotions, to your intuition. And it also affects your physiology. It also affects how you view the world. And so when people say, just get over it, or, oh, I don't need to go back there. You don't. Going back can mean what I did, which was learning how to rewire your nervous system, learning to get in touch, drop down into your body and deal with the support that your body needs, the wounded part of you needs, rather than logically going to a story. Therapy works for a lot of people. Meds work for a lot of people, but they were never designed, not the therapy. The medications were not designed for lifelong use. They were meant for short-term use. Read the black box warnings. Read them. And so we do need them. I've needed them over time. But, just think about a Band-Aid, right? We've got to get to the root cause that's causing the anxiety, or we're just going to keep switching meds. Then we're going to have all of the side effects that go along with it. Therapy is an amazing thing, can be super helpful. And my hat's off to all the therapists and the people in the world. It's just timing, right? If I come into you and my body's in a state of panic and my body is in a state of absolute fear and anxiousness, the last thing I need to do is re-traumatize myself. And you can tell when you leave your session, do you feel better? Do you feel deflated? If you feel great, then maybe that's, your body has enough felt sense of safety that it works for you. But if you're coming out feeling depleted and like re-traumatized, you simply got to learn the ways to get your nervous system regulated first. Learn to get yourself into that parasympathetic state, that state of calm aliveness, and then go to that support system, go to that therapist, go to that church, go to that pastor, whatever that support system is for you. And then, revisit that if you feel you need to. A lot of times when you just drop down, things will come up. But once you're able to, not cave into the feelings, but give your body and your little wounded part the support it needs, then you will be able to, talk about things and listen, and handle that a lot more, just a lot better. So I mentioned earlier about the Phoenix, and I, it always had a special place in my heart. And it's funny, it's all coming around full circle now. It's my logo, but I didn't realize even then, I always knew it would be the Phoenix in some way, because rising from the ashes to beauty is really important to me. But now when I looked at it from a faith perspective, it's just all of these, it kind of closed that circle for me. everyone has that dark soul of the night. If you've lived long enough, you have that dark soul of the night moment, right? And we need to rise from that. We need to rise from those ashes, rise up, like I showed in that first slide. This is my goal, help you to rise up to what, in this case, for me, the phoenix symbolizes, it's an external flame. And if you look at my logo, it's a little girl, because my feeling is you heal the little girl and the woman appears. That is the rising up. It symbolizes hope, rebirth, healing, transformation. And then the phoenix also reminds you to rise up, like I said, from the beauty to ashes, from the inside out. We need to practice resurrection every day, right? And I learned about the humility plan in a Bible study I did, and I loved this. This is where we are realigned to see our mistakes, failures, and problems as reminders of how much we need the Lord, or whatever that support system is for you, how much we need it. We do not have control over all the situations in the world as much as we would love to. And the less control you felt younger, the more control you want as you get older. And if you think about it, how much of what you try to control really works out? It often doesn't. And a lot of times we prepare ourselves and prepare for things that like never even happen. Our independence and self-sufficiency can actually create barriers, right, between us and God, us and support. So when I talked earlier about strive less and trust more, it's not to dissuade you from ambition or big goals. It's to remind us to check our motives. Pride leads to death, and surrender leads to life. So, when we feel like we can't give up our shopping, or we can't give up our sugar, or we can't give up, giving ourselves opportunity to rest, we got to just keep going and going and going and going. Those things are like a death by many cuts. It is a slow death. And from the gut perspective, food can be information, right? It can be medicine, or it can be a slow form of poison. It depends on what you're doing. And how you feel, taking a look at the exterior body and the interior body can give you huge clues as to whether what you're doing is working for you. And if it's not, then that's where we have to set pride aside and surrender, right? We got to surrender to the fact that our egos, right, is, Wayne Dyer used to say, edging God out. Our egos are getting in the way of doing the things that we need to do. And why would we want to self-sabotage? We want to love ourselves, and we want to love others. We don't want that fast approach, drive through the urgent care or the immediate gratification, get a Band-Aid for it and keep pressing on. No, we want to get down to the root cause. So I'll wrap this up here in a few minutes. The antidote, and I think when I'll go back here 1 minute, I put love here because obviously love is the antidote for fear. And, you have through love, one has no fear. The Apostle John said, there is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. And my goodness, is that not a message that we all need right now? Probably in our homes, in our world, that we need to get out of this constant state of fear. It's making us fat. It's making us stupid. And, we were built for so much more. Again, this is just talking about your fear center. That's, again, part of that brain. Why do we not want to? The amygdala is your fear center. Oxytocin, a lot of people have heard of that, the cuddle hormone, the love molecule. The more oxytocin we can have by finding ways to schedule fun into our life. Heck, you can even schedule worry into your life if you need to. If you got to worry, schedule an hour in the day or a few hours per week and just worry about everything you need to. Or before you go to bed, do that brain dump. Get it all out on paper and put it to rest so that you can go to sleep. That oxytocin increases your happiness. It reduces stress. It fosters kindness, right? Charity, service, all of the things that, can bring joy to your life. These are two books here that were good. I'm reading this Lost Connections right now. It's really good. And it talks a lot, really pertinent as to what's happening right now and what's happened in the last several years of just losing connections with values and others. And it's just a really good book to read there. So what are the solutions in all of these things I've talked about? It seems like doom and gloom, right? No, there's actually hope. There's actually a lot of hope. And, if what you're doing is not working for you, what can you do? Well, you can partner with a health coach. That's why I'm doing this. Here's my Phoenix, right? Here's my little girl rising up so that woman can come out and shine and ignite her energy and live on purpose and live authentically and stop the suffering. Take that journey into your nervous system. That's why I showed you the different states. Learning the different states and learning how to track your nervous system is ways that you can learn to regulate. Targeted supplementation. I have this one on here because this was one of the pivotal solutions that really moved the dial for me, along with other, all the other things, the good sleep, learning that I had to dial back completely on the exercise. This was huge. This has the probiotics that was helping with the gut issues. There was there's a part here for focus, for mental clarity. I also used something called Happy Juice, which was really good for more energy, motivation, all natural products. And then, of course, this Mentasync is where I was telling you, it focused on that gut-brain communication. Mine was severely wrecked. And the difference between August and today, I mean, I couldn't even tell you in words how much. Unfortunately, with the state of a lot of the foods now, we have to have supplementation to fill in the gaps for all of the nutrient deficiencies that are happening. So that was one of the solutions. Taking a journey into your nervous system, Trauma Healing Accelerated. That was what I started 2 years ago and that is who I'm doing my biology of trauma certification with. That taught me how to get into my nervous system, rewire my nervous system. Don't go back into re-traumatizing yourself. Learn how to regulate your nervous system. And then you can go ahead, like I said, provide that safety, that support, and then you go into growth and expansion. And if anybody wants the link, she has something called the 21-Day Journey. Might have a different name now. But it teaches you those different exercises that can provide to your nervous system in different states. So when you're in the stress state, what exercises are going to help you kind of disrupt that dysregulation? And you do a different one each day, a small time commitment. I actually have the website listed here at the bottom of this slide. And she has that certification track. So if you're practitioners and you want to learn more about this for your practices, there's a practitioner track, which is what I'm doing. And then there's one you can get on, just do it for yourself, just learning to regulate yourself so that, anxiety and all of the fear and all of this doesn't overtake you. The 7 essentials, that's my freedom framework. That's part of our coaching. That's part of one of those 3 tiers that we talked about, right? The 3-tier approach and trusting more. The fundamentals, this is just telling you why it's different. It goes into that microbiome modulation, helps with gut integrity, priming your immune system, and then, of course, the neurotransmitter signaling, that serotonin in your belly. Now, it doesn't just magically float up into your brain. That's not how it works. But when you improve the serotonin production in your body, you start to feel better. And then I'll wrap this up with the last few slides. You don't have a soul, you are a soul. You have a body, right? I put in the beginning, rise up. This is my mission to help people find your fire, reconnect with your true self, ignite your energy, set healthy boundaries, evaluate expectations, the ones you put on yourself and the ones you put on others. Utilize a support system. It can be your church. It can be a coach, right? That's what I'm doing this for. It can be a coach. It can be prayer. But you've got to have that. You've got to have that place where you can allow yourself to be and give yourself permission. Give yourself permission to just be. This is the freedom framework, as what I'm calling it for right now. But this are the 7 essentials that we would evaluate in a coaching session. Now, you may not need all of these. There's other opportunities. I have food and life. 2 services right now are the food and lifestyle review and one-on-one coaching. And I'll give you my website at the end of this. You can book a free discovery call and see if we connect, if we're a fit, and if, where are you in this continuum? Faith and fun. Do you have the support? Are you having fun? Are you having fun? We've got to get some fun in our life. Looking at your resilience. There again, we're looking at that nervous system regulation, that ability to use our food as medicine and to use movement and sleep. your environmental, again, we're going to take a look at environmental influences, internal and external. I guess, look, I see a typo here, but where is your energy level? We need to look at that. If you are in overwhelm, you are in a low energy state. That is indicative of where we go, how we move forward. It won't be doing 90-minute HIIT workouts or, running any half marathons if you're in that state. Looking at your diet. Are there food sensitivities? How can we add more good food in? We don't have to look at it as a space of deprivation. There's actually something called dietary resistance, where you are sitting there, and this is me for sure, you are sitting there dissecting every morsel that you put in your body. Looking at optimal sleep and, of course, movement. All of these are going to help you find your fire and then find peace. You don't realize how much you've neglected yourself until you make yourself a priority again. And I hope that you know you are worth it. Again, it looks like I don't have the website. I'll put it down in the comments. The website where you can book a free discovery call with me. If you're, wondering about trauma and the definition that I gave you, it's not necessarily the massive traumas that we do incur in our life, like abuse and, war and famine and all of the horrible things that happen. Those are traumatic. Those cannot be minimized. But neither can anything that overwhelmed your nervous system and is keeping you stuck, keeping you stressed out, and keeping you sick. And then the happy quiz, again, you want these, I will put them in the comments. This is also on my Facebook banner. If you look up in the right corner, you can click take a happy quiz, see where you fall. It's going to give you recommendations based upon your score as to what can help you. So I'll wrap this up. We're just 1 minute over. I want to thank you so much for coming on Saturday morning. If you have any questions, you can post them here or you can DM me. And I hope that you have an absolutely wonderful and happy and healthy Saturday. Thank you again. I really appreciate you being here.